Awakened Shadows. Written exclusively for Romance Audiobooks-Love. Copyright 2025. All rights reserved. Chapter 1. Melinda used to wait for the change. Every full moon, she would stand beneath the silver light until her feet went numb against the cold earth, praying to feel something stir inside her. A shift. A spark. A heartbeat that wasn't quite her own. But the moon only watched in silence, and the wind was the only thing that answered back. The others had stopped waiting long ago. They still smiled at her, of course, kind, careful smiles. But there was something behind their eyes she could read too easily now. Pity, distance, fear, maybe. What kind of wolf couldn't shift? What kind of creature was she supposed to be? So Melinda learned to disappear quietly. She ran the errands no one wanted, patrolled the borders no one bothered to check. She told herself it was enough, to serve, to belong in the smallest way she could. But at night, when the howls rose through the valley and she sat alone in her human skin, a hollow ache throbbed in her chest, louder than any sound she had ever made. Then came the night the moon turned crimson, and for the first time, something answered her back. It started as a pulse beneath her ribs, faint, uncertain, like the first heartbeat of something waking after a long sleep. Melinda froze. Eyes lifted to the red-tinted moon as the air thickened around her. The trees, the earth, even the air itself seemed to tremble. A whisper threaded through her thoughts. Not a voice. Not exactly. More like the memory of one. Her knees buckled. The forest spun. Color bled and brightened in ways that didn't make sense. The familiar scent of pine twisted into something sharper, iron and storm. It was as if the night had cracked open, showing her the hidden places beneath the world. Everything passed through her, the heartbeat of the land, the sorrow in the wind, the pull of the moon that no longer looked so silent. "Melinda," it murmured, soft but vast. "Why do you beg for a form that isn't yours?" Tears stung her eyes. "Because I don't know who I am without it." The moon's glow deepened, spilling down like bloodied silk. Shadows curled around her fingertips, not claws, not fur. Something else entirely. The earth shivered beneath her bare feet. She wasn't without a wolf. She simply wasn't meant to have their kind of wolf. And destiny, it seemed, had not forgotten her after all. The shadows did not frighten her. They were familiar, as if they had always lived beneath her skin, waiting for the right night to breathe. When she stretched out her hand, they obeyed, rippling through the air like smoke and starlight before sinking back into her palm. Melinda exhaled, the sound trembling with disbelief. The forest was utterly still. Every living thing holding its breath, watching her. Even the wind had gone quiet, bent low under the strange gravity of what was happening. Then, from a distance, came the first howl. Long and clear, echoing through the trees. Her pack. They had seen the crimson light, perhaps even smelled the shift in the air. They would come running, their alpha leading, ready to face whatever threat dared to touch their territory. Only the threat was her. Panic fluttered through her chest, but the moon's voice lingered, quiet and steady. You were never broken, little one. You were simply different. Different. The word used to cut, but now it rang with a strange sort of power. The shadows coiled once more, rising like silver-black mist around her shoulders, whispering against her skin. She didn't know what she had become. Wolf, witch, something entirely new. But for the first time in her life, she was whole. As the howls drew nearer, Melinda lifted her head to the blood-red moon and let the sound that rose from her throat join the chorus. Not a wolf's call, but something deeper, older. It shook the trees, swept through the valley, and the night replied in kind. The crimson light still burned through the trees, but what stepped out of it was not the moon's grace. It was a man. Chapter 2. At first, Melinda thought the forest was tricking her eyes. He moved like shadow and flame, his presence bending the air around him. Every instinct in her body screamed to run, and yet something deeper, older, whispered to stay. He stopped a few steps away, his gaze catching hers. In them, she saw the same strange current that had been stirring inside her. Power, wrapped in quiet knowing. But there was something else, too. Recognition, ancient and aching, as though his soul had been searching for hers across lifetimes. His voice, when it came, was low, almost reverent. There you are. Finally. Melinda's throat tightened. Who are you? He tilted his head slightly, studying her with an intensity that made her skin prickle with awareness. The one you've been calling for, though you didn't know it. I wasn't calling anyone, she said, but her voice trembled. He took another step closer, and the air between them seemed to hum with invisible threads pulling taut. Oh, you were. Every time you looked at the moon and begged to change. Every time you asked why you were left behind. You weren't ignored, Melinda. You were answered. The shadows around her stirred again, drawn toward him as if recognizing him, as if remembering something her conscious mind could not yet grasp. The strange heartbeat beneath her ribs synced with his the moment he stood before her. Her destined mate. But he was not a wolf. She could sense that instantly. No pack scent. No tether to the goddess who had blessed her kind. There was something wilder, older, more dangerous in him. Melinda swallowed hard. You can't be my mate. Can't? His smile was slow, heartbreaking in its sadness, as though he carried the weight of years she couldn't remember. Or shouldn't. He reached out, his hand hovering near her cheek. Warmth radiated from his palm before he even touched her. The moon may bless wolves, he murmured, his voice dipping lower, more intimate. But sometimes destiny chooses its own path. Sometimes it chooses a girl who was never meant to be found in a forest.
wearing a wolf's borrowed life. And when his fingers finally brushed her skin, the contact sent lightning through her veins. The shadows that had slept inside her burst into light, the forest trembling around them, and she gasped at the rightness of it. Melinda didn't know what she was becoming, only that, for the first time in her life, she wasn't alone. And somehow, she recognized him. Not in memory, but in her very bones. The glow still lingered on Melinda's skin when the first branches broke behind her. Footsteps and paws, heavy and sure, circled from every direction. She didn't have to turn to know them. Their ripple of unease threaded through the air like a storm about to break. Dozens of eyes glinted between the trees, wolves and those in human form, all poised halfway between fury and fear. None of them dared to speak. They looked at the man standing beside her, then at the strange, shifting shimmer around her body. The scent in the air wasn't familiar. Not wolf, not any creature they knew. It was old. It was wrong. The alpha stepped forward, his eyes a cutting gold that burned even in the red haze. "Melinda," he growled, her name barely recognizable through the thickness of his anger. "What have you done?" Melinda opened her mouth, but no words came. How could she explain something she barely understood herself? "She's done nothing wrong," the man said, his tone calm. Calm enough to make it more dangerous. "You should be thanking her." The alpha snapped his gaze toward him, every muscle in his body coiling. "Who are you to speak to my pack?" The man smiled slightly, the light catching on the edge of something unknowable in his eyes, something ancient and burning. "No one to your pack, but everything to her. The other half of what was shattered." A low snarl rippled through the wolves, tension biting the air clean in half. Several shifted closer to their alpha, ready to defend, though not one of them could identify what, exactly, they were ready to fight. Melinda turned, meeting her alpha's gaze. There had always been respect there. Pity, sometimes. But never this raw, open fury. He looked at her like she had betrayed them all just by standing next to this stranger. She wanted to explain, to tell him this wasn't a choice she had made. It was something written into the very fabric of her being, something that had always been waiting to be found. "Move away from him," the alpha ordered. His voice trembled under the weight of a threat. "Now." Melinda didn't move. The shadows around her stirred again, responding not to command, but to instinct, responding to him. The man's presence beside her pulsed with quiet steadiness, grounding her even as the pack's fear pressed in close.
She shook her head slowly. "I can't. He's mine." The words slammed into her, terrifying and true. Beside her, the man's breath caught. The alpha snarl deepened. "He's not one of us." "Melinda." "No," the stranger said softly, stepping forward, his eyes never leaving hers. And in them, she saw longing so deep it could have swallowed worlds. "But neither is she. Not the way you believed." The forest held its breath, The truth, whatever it was, hung between them like lightning waiting for a place to strike. Chapter 3. The Alpha's expression hardened, his jaw flexing. The muscles along his arms rippled, the faint shimmer of his wolf form threatening to break through. Around him, the rest of the pack formed a crescent, half-circle of teeth and tension. Their fear and confusion pressed against her skin like heat. Her heart pounded. The stranger didn't flinch. If anything, the corners of his mouth curved, a trace of pity, maybe understanding, edging his calm. "She doesn't belong to you," the Alpha growled. His voice cracked the air like thunder. "She is pack. She will always be pack." The man's gaze flicked toward him, measured, steady, unafraid. "She belongs to herself. Perhaps that's what you never let her believe." A low, collective snarl tore through the wolves. Dust stirred at their paws. Every sound in the forest retreated until all that existed was breath and heartbeat. "Enough!" Melinda stepped forward before she realized she had moved. The shadows responded, drifting out around her in ribbons, soft and glimmering, touched with shades of midnight. The wolves froze. Even the Alpha's rage hesitated for a breath as he took in what she had become, what she now was. "I never asked for this. For years I tried to be what you needed me to be. The girl without a wolf, the one who followed without question. But he," she glanced toward the man at her side, his presence, a second heartbeat. He chose me." The Alpha bared his teeth. "He's cursed you," he hissed. "Maybe," she said softly. "Or maybe the curse is believing the moon decides what we are allowed to be." A sharp wind cut through the clearing. It lifted her hair, pulled the scent of earth and spice across the pack. The man's hand brushed hers, grounding her. But he didn't speak. The warmth of his palm, the slight tremor in his fingers, made her breath catch. It was as if he too was overwhelmed by this connection. Melinda looked at her Alpha, at the only family she had ever known, and the sudden weight of choice settled deep in her bones. A line drawn quietly in the dark, the point from which everything would divide. "I'm not turning against you," she said, "but I'm not hiding anymore." Her shadows flared once more, neither light nor darkness, but something that shifted between both. And for the first time, the pack stepped back. Not out of command, but out of awe. The Alpha's anger broke first, not in a violent way, but softly, like a dam giving up against the weight of its own water. The golden light in his eyes dimmed until they softened into something almost human again. He looked older, somehow, shoulders sinking beneath the burden of something neither dominance nor pride could carry. "Melinda." His voice was steady but quiet. The sound of it alone made her chest ache. She had grown up to that voice. It had scolded her when she trained too hard and praised her when she refused to give up. It had never mocked her for being different, never called her broken, never let anyone else do it either. He took a cautious step forward, hands open, no threat in his movements now. Around them, the pack lowered their heads, uncertain but obedient. The angry hum in the air slowly ebbed. "You were never less to me," he said. "I need you to understand that."
Melinda didn't breathe. The shadows around her stilled, waiting. "I tried to keep you safe when the others whispered," he continued. "I tried to make a place for you here, even when the moon stayed silent. You thought I pitied you, but I didn't. I admired you. You stood in your skin when every other wolf needed fur to feel whole." His eyes burned again, but with sorrow this time. "Stay," he said, the word trembling. "If not for them, then for me. For what we've built here." His voice choked into a sound she had never before heard coming from him. "You don't owe the moon or this man your life. Not when everything that shaped you is here." Her throat closed. She wanted to speak, to explain that it wasn't that simple. That pull from their connection wasn't a choice she could reason away. The man beside her was silent, though she heard his heartbeat, a slow, steady rhythm in the air between them. She appreciated that he didn't press her. He simply waited. Melinda looked at her alpha, the man who had found her shivering on the forest floor at 13, who had told her she still belonged even without a wolf form to claim her. He had been her protector when no one else knew how. And now, he was asking her to choose.
Chapter 4. Tears sprang to Melinda's eyes. "You've never made me feel unwanted." "Then don't leave," the Alpha said. She looked down at her hands, at the faint, soft swirl of shadows gathering around her fingers, the mark of everything she was becoming. "I wish I could be both," she confessed. "Yours and mine." The Alpha nodded once, slow, as if he'd known this moment was always coming. "That's the thing about destiny," he said. "It rarely lets us keep what we love. Not in the way we want." The silence that followed was heavy and kind at once. Melinda stepped forward and hugged him, pouring all her love into that simple embrace. Her heart wasn't steady, but her voice was. "I'll always come back if you need me." He released her and she stepped back. He gave her a smile, both weary and sad and proud. "I know." With her own small smile of farewell, she turned to the stranger, the one destiny had pulled from shadow and flame. His hand slipped into hers, the touch providing a promise that she would never walk alone again. The forest didn't protest. It simply let her go. Melinda followed him through the trees, the night air wrapped softly around them, carrying the scent of pine and earth and a faint trace of ash from some distant fire. The pack's presence faded behind her until even her Alpha's heartbeat was gone from her senses. Only then did she realize how quiet the world could be, and how loud her own thoughts became when no one else filled the silence. The man walked ahead, unhurried, his steps sure as if he'd made this path many times before. Occasionally, he would glance back, and the tenderness in his gaze made her pulse quicken. Those glances asked silent questions. "Are you still with me? Do you trust this? Do you feel what I feel?" All questions that she answered by following him blindly, willingly, without hesitation. The shadows parted for him, bending as though they recognized his claim over them. "Where are we going?" she asked. He didn't turn. "Away," he said simply.
From what? From what you were never meant to be. She accepted his answer, trusting him, though she was not quite sure why. The air was cool and damp now, threading through her hair, whispering over her skin like something familiar. She frowned, stepping closer. She wanted to ask him to hold her hand, to bridge the small distance between them. But fear held her tongue. Not fear of him, but fear of how desperately she wanted it. A few steps later, he glanced over his shoulder with eyes like molten silver. Let me ask you a question. What do you remember? Before the forest. Before the pack. Melinda blinked. Before? Yes, he said, intentionally light. Before all of this. She tried to laugh, but it faltered. Very little came to her at first, just fragments, soft and half-dreamed. I don't remember everything, she admitted, eyes searching the shadows. Only feelings. He slowed his pace, waiting. There was light, she said slowly, her words almost uncertain as they formed. Warm, golden light. My mother used to hum when she brushed my hair. And my father, she hesitated, sensing a trembling in her chest. He'd lift me onto his shoulders to pick flowers from the high branches of dark blue trees. There were so many of them, all with different petals. Gold, violet, white. I think I loved one kind best. It shimmered when the sun touched it. The man listened silently, though his pace had slowed considerably, as if he were holding his breath. And there were halls, Melinda continued, her brows drawing together as she reached for the edges of the memory. Wide halls, shining like they were carved from crystal. I used to run through them barefoot. There were animals, too, not like the ones here. They'd follow me, even the wild ones. My mother said the world loved me, just as I loved it. She smiled faintly, eyes gone distant. I remember running through those halls looking for someone. Always looking. And when I found him, when he'd catch me and spin me around, I felt like I'd come home. It sounds silly now, doesn't it? Not silly, he said quietly. His voice was rough, strained, as though those memories cost him something precious to hear. Her breath caught. And then everything changed. There was shouting. Fire. The world went from sunlight to shadow in an instant. I remember someone screaming my name. A woman crying. And a man, I think it was my father, telling me to run. She swallowed. I didn't make it far. I fell. And when I opened my eyes again, I was in the woods, surrounded by wolves. They said I was lost, that I must have wandered too far. But I always wondered. She trailed off.
The stranger's gaze lingered on her for a long moment. The silver in his eyes darkened with something unreadable. Regret, maybe. Or sorrow. Or love so fierce it could burn worlds. What do you know about my past? She asked softly. Instead of answering, he reached out, brushing an invisible strand of light from her hair. A touch so tender it made her knees weak. Enough to know those aren't dreams, he said,
voice low, and that everything you were, everything you lost, is waiting to be found again. Melinda's pulse fluttered. "Then where are we going?" she whispered. He gave that half-smile again, secretive, ancient, and achingly sad. "Somewhere you already belong, even if you don't remember how to find it yet." As he turned to walk on, he extended his hand back to her, an invitation, a plea. Without thinking, she took it, their fingers interlacing. The contact sent electricity through her, and he shuddered at the same moment. They walked hand in hand after that, and behind them, unseen, the slender thread of her old life, her pack, her alpha, her silence, faded into the dark. Ahead, the wind carried the faint scent of flowers.
Chapter 5. They walked until the world began to change. The trees grew taller, darker at the roots but lighter at the crown, their leaves swaying with a language Melinda almost understood. The earth softened beneath her feet, and the air took on a faint shimmer, like sunlight filtering through water. Hours might have passed, maybe days. Time had loosened its hold, or she had simply stopped counting. The stranger didn't speak again for a long while. His silence wasn't cruel, though. It was thoughtful, like he was listening to something she couldn't hear. Finally, curiosity broke through her quiet. "You never told me your name," she said, her voice tentative, fragile in the stillness between them. He squeezed her hand gently. "Names carry weight," he said. "Some are best spoken when the world is ready to hear them." "That's not an answer." "It's the only one I can give at the moment." Melinda gave a soft laugh that didn't quite reach her eyes. "So, you'll tell me where we're going or your name when the world is ready? What am I supposed to do until then?" He stopped walking and turned to face her fully. In the moonlight, she could see the sharp lines of his jaw, the intensity of his gaze, the way his chest rose and fell with careful breaths, as if he were struggling to maintain control of himself around her. "You're supposed to remember," he said, his voice dropping to something intimate and urgent. "You mean what I saw? The light? My parents?" "I mean all of it," he said, stepping closer. "The laughter before the fear. The promise before the fall. And most importantly," he reached up and brushed his thumb along her cheek, his knuckles dusting her chin. "You're supposed to remember the boy who loved you so much. He would wait 1,000 lifetimes to find you again." Something deep in her chest twisted, and suddenly she understood why home had always stayed just out of reach. It wasn't that she never belonged to her pack. It was that a part of her had already belonged somewhere else. To someone else. A flicker of motion caught her eye. Up ahead, between the trees, small lights pulsed like stars fallen to earth. They danced, weaving through the grass. Fireflies, she thought at first. But no, they were too bright, too graceful. "What is this place?" she asked. He slowed. "The edge," he said. "Where one world begins to remember another." As they stepped into the glade, the smell of flowers, unknown in her former world, returned to her in a rush. She reached up with a fingertip to trace the same glittering blooms from a lifetime ago, currently glowing faintly as if lit by their own memories.
The scent wrapped around her heart, bringing with it a pang so sharp she had to close her eyes. A hand brushed hers, steadying her. He wrapped an arm around her waist, pulling her close to his side, anchoring her as her knees threatened to give way. "You feel it," he said against her hair. "Yes. I know this place." But when she opened her eyes, the memories blurred. Faces half-formed. Voices cut off before names could be spoken. And at the center of it all, fire again. The battle that had ended everything she remembered. Her panic rose like tidewater. It burned. It burned to nothing. I saw it fall. The man caught her shoulders gently, firm enough to hold her gaze. His hands trembled slightly, and she was near enough to note the wild racing of his heart where her back pressed against his chest. Not everything was lost. Melinda, some things were hidden. Some things were sent away to be found when the time was right. She stared at him, her mouth trembling. You knew my family."
He stepped back, his eyes reflecting the glow of the strange flowers. When he looked at her, she saw centuries of love and longing burning in those eyes, saw in his gaze the answer before he spoke it.
"Yes," he said. "I did." Before she could speak again, the light around them shifted. The air rippled like a disturbed pool, and a voice, distant but warm and familiar, seemed to call her name through the shimmer of memory. "Melinda." She turned, and the night itself began to part. The voice that called her name was like sunlight made a sound, bright, tender, impossible to ignore. It filled her chest before her mind could grasp its meaning, tugging at something deep, something long buried. The lights around them pulsed faster, responding to some heartbeat that wasn't quite her own. And then memory, real, whole, returned in a rush. Melinda stumbled as her knees hit the soft earth. Images flooded her vision. The halls of shimmering stone she had dreamed about. The scent of sweet blossoms twining through warm air. Laughter echoing like bells. Not dreams. Home. She remembered her mother first, her elegant smile, and the soft brush of wings trailing light when she walked. Then her father, tall, sharp-eyed, but gentle when he lifted her small hands to help her shape light from air. Fae, both of them. Not wolves, not human. Fae. And then the boy. A boy with storm-gray eyes and laughter like music caught in rain, who'd sneak out of the royal gardens to race her across the meadows. A boy with the exact same eyes that were watching her now, burning with recognition and desperate, aching love. A boy who had always found her when she got lost in the great halls, who swore he'd protect her when he grew strong enough. A boy who she had thought she loved even then, in a way that made her chest tight and her stomach flutter. She remembered tripping over her own words around him, the way her heart would race when he looked at her for too long, how his smile could turn her knees to water even when they were children. She remembered thinking she would tell him someday that she liked him, that his name alone was sacred to her. She remembered the last time she had seen him before the fire, how he'd held her hand and promised he'd never let anything happen to her, and how she had believed him with the absolute faith of a child. "Kellen," she said, tasting the name like honey and salt on her tongue. The man, Kellen, turned slowly, and the faint wistfulness in his eyes broke into open wonder. The kind of awe that held both joy and ache, so profound it seemed to crack the very foundation of the world. "You remember." His voice shook with the weight of years of searching, of longing, of never being able to stop loving her even when he thought she was lost forever. Her heart thudded. "You were him all along." He nodded once, stepping toward her with the careful movements of someone approaching something precious and fragile. "I had to let you forget. They hid you among the wolves after the invasion. It was the only way to keep you safe when the courts fell." Tears stung her eyes. Visions unfurled behind them. Fire in the crystal halls. Her mother's silver wings consumed by flame. Her father's ward shimmer collapsing as soldiers poured through the palace gates. How he'd pressed an amulet into her hand, whispering words of magic to make her forget. How he'd fallen to his knees watching her disappear into the forest, tears streaming down his face. "I thought you were gone," she said. "All of it. Everyone." "I've searched for you for years." "Melinda." He moved until the space between them crackled with something both electric and fragile. "Every moment without you was torture. Every night I wondered if you were alive, if you remembered me, if you hated me for letting you go. I would have burned the world to ashes to find you." He reached out and cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away the tears that fell. "And now you're here. You're real. You're mine. Every forest, every fading whisper of magic led me here. To you."
Her breath hitched as his hand brushed along her cheek, warm and familiar and almost unbearably gentle. The touch unlocked another wave of memory. The promise they'd made as children, whispered beneath blooming trees. "We'll always find each other again, no matter where the world hides us." And he had kept the promise she knew nothing about. Melinda looked at him fully, not the stranger from the forest, not the shadowed savior, but the boy she had loved, the one she had lost before she ever got the chance to tell him, the one she had been searching for in her heart every single day, even when she didn't know his name. "You found me," she said through the tears. Kellen smiled back, his thumb tracing the tear that slipped down her face. When he smiled, she remembered why her young heart had loved him. The gentleness beneath the strength, the sorrow he carried so bravely, the way he made her feel like she was the most precious thing in the world. "And you remember me," his sweet breath caressing her forehead. He leaned down slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted to, his eyes asking permission before he stole her answer. But Melinda didn't pull away. Instead, she rose on her toes and met him halfway. When their lips touched, it was like the world realigning itself, like coming home after a lifetime of wandering. It was gentle and desperate all at once, a kiss that held years of longing and the promise of forever. When they finally broke apart, foreheads pressed together, both breathing hard, Kellen whispered words she didn't quite hear. They sounded like promises in Fae, ancient words that made the flowers around them bloom brighter, that made the stars themselves seem to lean closer. The flowers around them bloomed brighter, their glow twisting upward like a quiet blessing. The world breathed differently for her from that moment on, not in grief or longing, but in recognition. Chapter 6. Kellen led her through the last stand of trees, their hands still interlaced, neither willing to break the connection. The feel of her hand in his grounded her, sealing the miracle of reconnecting with her past. The way he looked at her, with recognition and love and wonder all mingled together, made her chest ache with feelings she had long forgotten. They emerged into a clearing that looked like a slice torn from another world. The scent of steel and smoke hung in the air, the ground churned by boots and hooves. Tents stretched as far as she could see, their banners fluttering in the moonlight, dark green, embroidered with gold thread that gleamed like fire in the breeze. Thousands of people filled the camp, armored soldiers sharpening blades, archers stringing bows, healers tending the wounded, children darting between cookfires with laughing, fearless laughter. It wasn't a ragged band of desperate fighters. It was an army. A sea of eyes turned as they passed. Whispers rippled outward like rings in water. Recognition flashed in those eyes when they saw Kellen, and then reverence. They called out his name. "My king! My king returns!" And the sound struck her chest like thunder. But Kellen barely seemed to notice their adulation. His focus remained entirely on her, his thumb stroking the back of her hand in a gesture of quiet possession and affection that made her pulse quicken. But beneath the awe, there was curiosity, for her. Kellen didn't slow until they reached the largest tent at the center of camp, its poles wound with golden vine. The guards saluted, stepping aside at his simple nod. Inside, a long table dominated the space, maps and tokens scattered across its scarred surface. 6 figures turned as they entered. His council. "My lord," the first said, bowing, "we've finished preparations. At dawn, we'll strike. King Mandal won't see the next evening." Melinda froze at the name. Even her former pack had heard of the man that had spilled Fae blood until the rivers ran red, who had set the crystal halls aflame and claimed them as his own. Kellen squeezed her hand once before releasing it, though his eyes remained locked on hers for a moment. A silent apology for what came next, for the burden of their past that still demanded its price. Kellen stood at the head of the table, every inch of him composed authority. "Tell me." The commander leaned over the map. "A frontal siege, my king. Their walls will fall within a day. We outnumber them 2-1. Melinda bit her lip. The vision of her parents' broken home rose behind her eyes. The burning corridors, the screams echoing in marble halls. Mandal would expect a frontal siege. He wanted one. She hesitated, glancing at Kellen, at the men and women who looked ready to give their lives for him. That's not necessary. Every face at the table turned toward her. The air stilled. Kellen's expression shifted, a flicker of something. Pride, tenderness, hope crossing his features as he leaned back, silently inviting her to speak. Her pulse thrummed.
He valued her opinion even with this council watching. She stepped closer, mind foraging for half-forgotten memories. The castle has a secret entrance. A tunnel, hidden beneath the ornamental gardens. It leads straight into the inner keep, into the throne hall itself. The oldest counselor frowned. Impossible. King Mandal would have sealed every passage. They don't know about this one, Melinda said, meeting his eyes without flinching. It wasn't on any plan or mark left in the archives. My father told me about it. Said he discovered it in his service to the king as the commander of his royal guard. She also remembered her father finding her there once. Remembered him taking her hand and saying, "If anything ever happens, you run through here, and you don't look back. Promise me." She had promised, and he'd kissed her forehead with a tenderness that made her feel cherished in a way words could never capture. Silence followed, thick and weighty.
My mother used that same tunnel in our escape when the invasion began. We made it as far as the forest before. His voice cracked, and he turned away, unable to finish. Melinda's breath caught as understanding bloomed in her chest. Before what? She whispered, though she already knew. She could see it in the sudden tension of his shoulders, the way his hands clenched into fists. Before King Mandal's soldiers found us, he said, each word heavy as stone. My mother told me to run. She said she would hold them off, buy me time to escape. I was 16, almost a warrior. I didn't want to leave her, but she was so fierce, so certain. She said I had to survive, that I had to reclaim what was ours. He turned back to face her, and his eyes were red with grief. I wanted to stay, insisted on doing so. But at my mother's command, a guard knocked me out and carried me deep into the forest. He was cut down a few days later, the secret of the tunnel dying with him. Silence fell heavy after Kellen's words. All these years he'd carried that grief, that guilt, that terrible burden of survival. And she had been lost the whole time, taken from him, hidden among wolves while he bore the kingdom's weight alone. Melinda started towards him, hoping that her nearness would help console him. She didn't make it. One woman stepped forward from Kellen's right, blocking her path. She was beautiful. Breathtaking, really, with golden hair braided like a crown and emerald eyes that burned with both intellect and something more private, more possessive. She wore the crest of an old noble house upon her breastplate, one nearly as ancient as Kellen's own. "My king," she said smoothly, though there was steel beneath the silk. "You cannot seriously entertain the suggestion of a stranger." Her eyes turned toward Melinda, appraising, cool. "We have no proof of who she is or where she comes from. And now she conveniently appears with childhood tales and secret passages? Forgive me, but it reeks of deceit." Another of the counselors murmured agreement. "Lady Mallour is correct, my lord. We've all seen their spies use illusions." Heat climbed up her neck, shame and anger mixing in equal measure. How plain she must look, cloaked in travel dust and shadow, dressed like a wandering human.
She hated the way these people looked at her with suspicion, when all she had wanted was to help, to be part of something real again. The golden-haired Lady Mallour stepped closer to Kellen's chair. "We cannot risk your life on her word." Her tone softened when it turned toward him, becoming almost intimate. "Please, Kellen. You lead us, and we follow you to the last breath. Don't gamble all we've built on a stranger's story. I've been at your side all these years. I know the weight you carry. Let me help you bear it. You don't need her. You have me." Something in Melinda twisted at the way she said his name, softly, intimately. It told a story of familiarity, one she had no place in. The lights in the tent dimmed in response to her emotions. She forced herself to breathe, to control the magic that threatened to spill out unbidden. But before she could speak, Kellen shifted on his feet, the movement sending a ripple of command through the tent. His expression had hardened, become impenetrable. "She's not a stranger," he said calmly, but there was an edge to it that silenced the room. He spoke his next words clearly, deliberately, his eyes boring into the golden-haired woman's with an intensity that made her step back. "She is Melinda of House Vows, daughter of Lord Terran and Lady Alara." He paused, letting the weight of her name, her heritage, settle over the room. "And she is my destined mate, bound to me by magic older than this realm itself." Gasps cut through the council like blades. The golden-haired woman took a step back, her face blanched to marble. Melinda's breath caught. She hadn't expected him to announce it so openly, so publicly. The declaration of a destined mate was sacred among the Fae. It was a claim that couldn't be refuted or denied. It meant she was his, and he was hers, now and forever, in the eyes of magic itself. "That's not possible," one of the older generals muttered, his voice thick with disbelief. "The shadow is dead. She fell at the siege of the halls." Another whispered, "If she lives, if she truly lives, the prophecy." Kellen looked around them steadily. "She lives," he said, "and she stands here." He moved to Melinda, taking her hand and pulling her close to his side.
The gesture was unmistakably possessive and protective all at once. A clear message to everyone in the tent. She is mine, and I will defend her with my life. But their fear was rising now, crowding out awe. Murmurs turned to suspicion. Hands drifted toward pommels and charms. Melinda could taste the scent of barely leashed panic. Shadow. The word echoed through her head. She remembered the first time she had noticed her magic as she lived among the wolves. The way light folded around her instead of shining through. She dismissed it as a trick of the light. Back on Fae soil, her magic burst forth like a seedling from the earth. The tent pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat. The lanterns flickered, then dimmed. "Melinda," Kellen said quietly, warning and concern coiling together in his tone. He squeezed her hand reassuringly, silently telling her he was here, that he believed in her. But it was too late. her magic surged. Darkness unfurled from her like wings, not empty shadow, but living, pulsing power that drank the light and replaced it with something colder, deeper. It filled every corner of the tent, swallowing whispers, silencing gasps. The council froze in place, ringed in velvet black, their faces illuminated only by the faint, eerie light of Melinda's eyes. The shadow, one of them stammered. It's true. The vastness of herself stretched outward. The shadows outside the tent stirred as well. She could blanket the entire valley if she wanted, cloak the tunnel, veil the castle, smother King Mandal's light entirely. Her power was intoxicating, terrifying, exquisite. It was everything she had been denied as a child, everything her people had feared in her, everything she had learned to hide. A deep, warm chuckle broke through her focus. "Melinda," Kellen said softly, his voice threaded with both pride and affection. "You've proved your point." His words were a lifeline, pulling her back from the edge of that vast darkness. The way he said her name, not with fear, but with love, grounded her. The magic collapsed. The darkness retreated like a tide rushing backward, folding neatly into her skin until only torchlight remained. But the world swayed. Melinda's knees gave out before she even realized she was falling. Kellen caught her easily, pulling her against him as the room exhaled in collective awe and terror. He lifted her into his arms without hesitation, cradling her against his chest as if holding her was the most natural thing in the world. Her vision blurred, her body trembling from the drain. The last thing she felt was Kellen's hand brushing loose strands of hair from her face, and his low whisper against her ear. "Rest, little shadow. You're safe now. I have you." Then, the world went dark again. This time, without magic.
Chapter 7. When Melinda woke, it was to a soft glow pressing gently behind her eyelids. The air smelled faintly of cedar and the scent before dawn, morning dew and clean air. The bed beneath her was feather-soft, sheets cool against her skin. For a heartbeat, her mind curled back to the battlefield, the council, the shadows. But then the quiet settled. Kellen sat close by the bedside. The lines around his eyes looked deeper, as if a year had passed instead of an hour. His hands were clasped together, resting against his mouth. A man lost in a storm only he could see. His hair was disheveled, as if he'd been running his hands through it in worry. His armor had been removed, replaced with simple dark linen. But even at rest, he looked like a warrior, all coiled tension and controlled power. She stirred. "Kellen?" He rose at once. Relief lit his eyes, followed by something raw, unguarded. "Melinda," he said, relief evident. Then softer, the words slipping out before he could stop them. "Are you okay, my love?" His tender endearment hung between them, an unintended confession that made Melinda's breath catch. She had hoped he had some feelings for her. More than simple friendship, more than for a shadow of a memory. His face paled.
"Forgive me," he began. "I didn't mean—" Her fingers reached for his hand before he could retreat, and she didn't simply curl her smaller hand around his. She held firm, anchoring him, refusing to let him pull away into shame. "It's all right," she whispered, her voice steady despite the trembling in her chest. "More than all right." "Melinda," he began, but she squeezed his hand gently. "I want you to be shameless about it. I want everyone to know how you feel about me. And that she placed their joined hands above her heart, that I never stopped caring for you here, even though I couldn't remember the color of your eyes, the deep timbre of your voice, the way my heart would race when you smiled at me." He looked down at their joined hands, his breath catching for a moment, then exhaled slowly. His other hand came up to cover hers, cradling it between both of his as if she were something fragile. "You frightened them," he admitted. "And you frightened me, though I would never say so outside these walls." She managed a soft smile. "I frightened myself." His thumb brushed the back of her hand, a quiet promise and a plea. "You cannot use that power again, Melinda. Not until you've drawn more of the realm's strength into you. Shadow casting that deep, without balance, without roots. It could kill you." The weight of what he said pressed between them, heavy with fear. But when she looked up at him, she saw past the fear to what lay beneath. A man terrified of losing her. The desperation in his eyes, the white-knuckled grip of his hand around hers. It told her everything about what she meant to him. She sat up a little, meeting his eyes with that same stubbornness he remembered from long ago. And when she moved, he immediately adjusted, his free hand moving to steady her, to help her sit, his movements careful and protective. "If that's what it takes," she said, "then so be it. Once I'm strong enough, I'll do what must be done. I'll help you take back the throne. I'll see our people free. Kellen, nothing will stop me." He shook his head slowly, torn between pride and dread. His pride in her determination was clear. The way his eyes brightened with it, the way his shoulders straightened. But the dread was stronger, a shadow that crossed his face. "I've thought of that," he murmured. His hand came up to frame her face, his thumb stroking her cheekbone with infinite tenderness. His touch lingered there, as if he needed to feel her warmth, her aliveness, to convince himself she was truly here and safe. Safe. He reached forward, brushing aside a strand of hair that had fallen into her face, his touch trembling. "You always did burn too brightly, even in the dark." Before she could answer, he leaned down and pressed his lips to hers. Not just on her forehead this time, but a true kiss. Deep and claiming and desperate. It spoke of all the years he'd waited, all the nights he'd feared she was truly gone, all the love he'd carried alone. When he finally broke away, they were both breathing hard, and his eyes held a fierce, protective intensity. He rested his forehead against hers for a long moment, just
breathing with her, just existing in the same space. "Rest," he whispered. "You need strength." Before she could answer, he leaned down and pressed his lips to her forehead, a kiss both blessing and farewell.
Then he stood. At the doorway, he paused. His silhouette was outlined by the soft luminescence that cloaked the tent walls, the weight of his decision carved deep into his shoulders. He whispered something under his breath, fey words that shimmered in the air like silver threads, before sinking into the doorway itself. When he looked back, his voice was barely audible. "I am sorry, my love. But losing you again would make this fight hollow. I must keep you safe, at all costs." The flap of the tent closed. Melinda rose unsteadily from the bed, crossing the short distance to the entrance. But as soon as she reached for the opening, the air thickened. Her fingers struck an invisible barrier, warm and unyielding, humming with runes. She tried again. Energy flared bright blue, warding seals blooming like frost, before fading back into invisibility. Her heart pounded. "Kellen," she called. But there was no answer. The walls pulsed softly, listening, alive with his magic. He had trapped her. For her safety. Anger flared, but beneath it was something fiercer, a love that hurt like hunger. She closed her eyes, pressing her palm against the unseen surface. "You can hold me here for now," she spoke into the silence, the promise of her magic whispering beneath her skin. "But shadow finds its way through everything. Even your light." Chapter 8. Outside her tent, the rhythmic thunder of boots began, steady at first, then swelling into the full march of thousands. The sound poured through the earth itself, vibrating up through the bed frame. She stood, clutching at the linen canopy. They were going. Kellen was going. Melinda pressed her hand to her chest, feeling the invisible thread that connected her to him. The ward he'd woven. A golden link that pulsed with his life force, his love, his fear. Out there, he rallied the troops, prepared for battle. His shoulders heavy with the burden of all those lives depending on him. Her breath came shallow. If they met Mandal's warriors head-on, even with their numbers, blood would flood the meadows. He would fight at the front. Of course he would. He had always been the sort to meet death eye to eye. When the last of the echoes drained into silence, the emptiness that followed was worse. The wards hummed softly around the tent, a lullaby meant to soothe, but they only deepened the ache in her chest. She pressed her forehead against the invisible barrier. "Please, Kellen, don't do this without me." A small scuffling sound broke the stillness. Footsteps. 2 sets. One light, almost hesitant, the other uneven and slow. The tent flap stirred, though the wards should have prevented it. A pale figure slipped inside. The golden-haired councilwoman, Lady Mallour. Her armor was gone. She wore a midnight cloak and, behind her, an old crone hunched under its weight, eyes gleaming like dusk itself. "If I release you,
Malor said without preamble. Will you save him? Melinda studied the woman's face, seeing beneath the jealousy and possessiveness to something else. Genuine love. The kind that wanted his happiness above all else, even if it meant stepping aside. She saw the sacrifice in Malor's eyes, and her heart softened toward her. Melinda blinked, hardly able to believe it. Yes, she said after a moment. Even if it costs me everything. She reached out and took Malor's hand, feeling the woman's startled gasp. I know you love him, Melinda said gently. I can see it. I do. But that is not important right now. Saving him and the others is. The crone shuffled forward, her staff tapping the earth. Enough of sentiment. If you don't hurry, the battle will begin, she muttered, studying Melinda as though through a veil of centuries. Her ancient eyes seemed to see straight through to Melinda's soul. And she nodded once, as if confirming something she had long suspected. Then she raised her free hand and murmured in a language older than stone. The air shivered. Blue-white cracks laced the invisible wall, and with a sound like breaking glass, the wards dissolved.
Melinda gasped as warmth flooded her, freedom pressing in where containment had been. The old woman turned her watery gaze back to Melinda. Your king's magic was strong. He meant you kept, girl. Now go quickly, before he feels the unraveling. The crone's words made Melinda pause. Something in them carried a note of familiarity, a hint of knowledge that seemed too deep, too knowing. But there was no time to question it. Malor's chin lifted. We'll need to reach the castle faster than the army. Can you open a passage? The crone's smile was thin and droll. I can open a thing or two. But stone hates my craft. Only nature endures it. She began to chant again, her voice like branches creaking in the wind. The air thickened, folded upon itself, and split in a swirl of silver and emerald. A portal bloomed in the middle of the tent, its edges flickering with petals and leaves caught in an unseen breeze. We go together, Malor said suddenly, stepping forward. Her emerald eyes burned with resolve, but Melinda could see the calculation beneath it. The woman was still fighting, still trying to prove her worth to a man who could never love her the way she wanted. The crone snapped her gaze up. Foolishness. One traveler, no more. The weave won't hold two. I'm not leaving her to walk into the shadows alone. Malor's voice softened when she said it. We go together. The crone, pressing gnarled fingers against her temple. Then share her passage. You'll be one breath, for one heartbeat, if the moon goddess allows it. She spoke faster now, the magic visibly draining her, the wrinkles deepening until her face looked carved of old bark, her hands twitching. The crone pressed on, her voice growing urgent. Lines of shimmering light spread across the ground like the roots of an ancient tree. Go quickly now, she rasped. Grip hands as you cross, and speak where you must be. The portal will hear and guide thee. Melinda didn't hesitate. She caught Malor's hands, their fingers locking together, an acknowledgement that they were fighting for the same person, even if in different ways. The portal wind lashed around them, the scent of wild rain and forest thick in the air. The entrance. Melinda closed her eyes. The tunnel in the woods outside the castle. Take us there. The magic flared, dragging them forward. The last thing she saw was the old crone sagging to her knees, smiling through the exhaustion as the world folded like water and swallowed Melinda and Lady Malor whole. Chapter 9. The pull of the portal made the air and color fold around them, twist through their lungs. The pull grew stronger the more they tried to draw breath. For a heartbeat, there was nothing but pressure and soundless wind. Then impact. They tumbled out of the light and onto cold, uneven ground. The air that met them was thick with damp and decay, tasting of old stone and buried things. Melinda's eyes fluttered open. Before them loomed a half-collapsed cave entrance. It might once have been carved with elegance, but time and neglect had reclaimed it. Dead branches clung to the arch like brittle claws. Thorny vines veiled the opening, and the rock itself was cracked with age. This is it. Melinda breathed, pushing herself up on shaky elbows. The sun gardens were above us. This tunnel leads into the castle foundations. Lady Malor, though flushed and disheveled from the portal's strain, was already on her feet. She brushed dirt from her cloak, then lifted both hands, palms outward. "Stand back!" A whisper of wind coiled around her fingers, and the vines began to stir. The withered branches split and crumbled, clearing most of the rubble away in a storm of dust. But heavy stones still blocked the entrance, stubborn and unyielding. "Nature will not touch what men have ruined," Malor said. "So, we move it ourselves," Melinda replied, setting her shoulders. They dug through the debris side by side. Their hands soon streaked in dirt and blood where sharp rock bit into skin. Fabric tore on jagged edges. It was slow, graceless work. And by the end, Melinda's arms ached so badly she thought they might never stop trembling. As they worked, Melinda found herself beginning to understand Malor better. Beneath the possessiveness and jealousy lay a warrior of principle, someone who placed duty above desire. When Malor helped her up after she stumbled in exhaustion, Melinda caught a glimpse of sadness in the woman's eyes, the knowledge that she would never have what she truly wanted. But finally, air stirred in the dark beyond the opening. A passage revealed. The cave swallowed them as they slipped inside. Their breath puffed steam into the stillness. "Wait," Malor said, closing her eyes. A whisper of fey words left her lips, and a sphere of golden light bloomed in the air before them, floating outward like a captured sun. It painted the tunnel with honeyed glow, revealing ancient supports and roots cutting through the ceiling. They had barely taken 10 steps when the faint echo of a distant trumpet rolled through the stone. One note, bold and chilling. "Kellen!" Melinda's pulse surged. The golden thread connecting them flared with urgency and fear. "He's close. The attack will begin soon." Malor frowned. "Then we'd better not waste what they're buying us." Melinda grabbed her hand, and they ran.
The tunnels came alive with their footfalls. Melinda knew the path, every corner, every twist, more familiar than drawing breath. She had chased through these corridors as a child, laughing, long before betrayal had rebuilt this place into ruin. Sweat soaked her back, strands of hair clinging to the curve of her cheek. The orb of light trembled to keep pace. Dust filled her lungs, still she ran faster. The connection to Kellen grew more frantic, more desperate. The battle was imminent.
Would she stop it in time? When they reached the end, a seamless slab of dark stone barred their way. No door, no hinge, yet the memory of the passage's heartbeat entered her mind. She hesitated only a moment, placed her palm against the cool rock, and let the words rise unbidden to her tongue. They rolled out as if they had lived in her blood all along. The stone rippled, then vanished, falling away into nothing. They stumbled forward, blinking in the sudden contrast. Barrels, crates, and sacks lined the low-ceilinged room, the scent of grain and dried herbs filling the air. "The castle's food stores," Mallory whispered. "We're through." Above them, through floor and stone, faint tremors shifted the air. Battle had begun. The screams of soldiers, the clash of steel, the terrible sound of magic clashing against magic, it all filtered down through the castle's ancient bones. Melinda turned to her companion, her chest heaving. "We can't fight them all," she said, the obvious truth laying heavy between them. Mallory smiled. Her small teeth looked sharper in the near darkness. "We don't have to. If we can reach King Mandel, hold him, the soldiers might stand down rather than risk his life." Melinda turned to her companion. "Now, that sounds like a plan."
Chapter 10. The castle's heart had been transformed into a war zone. Stone pillars bore deep gouges from sword and spell alike. Great tapestries of the old Fey kingdom hung in tatters, singed by magical fire. The marble floors that Melinda remembered as pristine and gleaming were now cracked and stained. The great hall was exactly as she remembered, but diminished by time and conquest. The throne of crystal and starlight had been shattered, replaced by a crude seat of black stone. And upon that seat sat a man. The man on the throne turned, and when he saw her, his face went white. For a moment, he looked like he'd seen a ghost. "You," he breathed. "You're alive." Before Melinda could process what she was seeing, a voice cut through the moment, sharp, commanding, edged with fury. "You will not hurt her!" Melinda turned to see Kellen emerge through the opposite doorway, his sword dripping with blood, his armor scarred from battle. His eyes, his storm-gray eyes, burned only for her. Behind him came his soldiers, flanking him, facing the enemy troops that poured through the throne room's other entrances. Lady Mallory came to stand by Kellen's side. Her clothes had seen the effects of war, singed and stained, and there were soot smudges on her cheeks. Somehow, in the journey through the castle's passages, they'd been separated. They had come across a group of Kellen's warriors. At one point, the group had fractured in those narrow stone corridors. Mallory hadn't followed the main force. She had deliberately peeled away, hunting through the castle's shadows until she found Kellen. The older woman's hand now rested on his arm, her fingers curling possessively around the scarred leather of his armor. And when Mallory's eyes met Melinda's across the throne room, there was a cold satisfaction in them, a silent message. "I found him first. I'm the one he trusts." But then Kellen's gaze locked onto Melinda, and everything else fell away. The fierce protective intensity that blazed from his storm-gray eyes was meant only for her. He took a step forward, as if to move toward her, and Mallory's grip on his arm tightened, trying to hold him in place. But he didn't hesitate. He shook off the older woman's touch with a gentleness that was nonetheless absolute, his attention completely consumed by Melinda.
The man on the throne rose slowly, And as he did, Melinda, the pieces clicked into place. A horrifying, impossible picture forming in her mind. "You see, little shadow," the man said, and his voice carried something that spoke of the old Fae courts. "I've been waiting for you to arrive." "Why? Why?" Melinda's voice was barely a whisper. "Why, to take over your powers, of course. Our dear mother had 2 children, you see. Me, whom she squirreled away to a forgotten cabin with an old nanny. And you, her legitimate daughter, with the commander of the King's Guard. Both of us inherited shadow magic from Mother. Care to see who is stronger?" Melinda's blood ran cold. A brother. She had a brother. And he ruled this kingdom with blood and cruelty. Kellen and his warriors moved forward. King Mandal's men did the same. "Stand down," King Mandal commanded, his voice rippling with shadow magic. "All of you. This is between the siblings." The soldiers on both sides hesitated, but Kellen ignored him, placing himself in between Mandal and Melinda. "It is me who you will fight," he said. "Then you'll watch her die," Mandal said coldly. Melinda raised her hand and placed it on his arm. "No, he's right, Kellen. It must be me." Kellen turned to her, anguish written across his face. "Melinda." "Trust me," she whispered. And when their eyes met, she saw the war within him, the need to protect her, the knowledge that she had to face this alone, the desperate hope that she would survive. Behind him, Malor stood rigid, her face pale, her hands clenched into fists. But even her jealousy couldn't compete with the magnitude of what was about to unfold. King Mandal descended from the throne, shadows pooling around him like a living thing. They writhed and twisted, darker than any natural shadow, tainted with malice and centuries of corruption. "Let's see what you're made of, sister." She faced Mandal. "Let's dance, brother." The battle began.
Melinda drew upon the shadow magic within her. Where Mandal's shadows were weapons of destruction and control, hers moved with purpose and protection. She sent waves of darkness toward him, and he countered with his own, the 2 magics clashing in the center of the hall like storms meeting over open water. Stronger than I expected. Mandal's shadows intensified. They lashed out like serpents, seeking to bind her, to drain her. Melinda dodged and weaved, her body moving with the grace of someone who had trained in the old ways, channeling the realm's energy through her. But King Mandal was older, more experienced in corruption. Slowly, he began to push her back. His shadows coiled tighter, faster, more vicious. Melinda's bones popped, her mind whirred. The magic ate at her like green fire, consuming her from within. "You're good," Mandal said, "but you're not ruthless enough. You care too much. That's your weakness." He was right. Even as she fought, Melinda was holding back, afraid of losing control like she had before the council members, afraid of the cost. Mandal's expression twisted into a cruel smile, and then, suddenly, he abandoned the direct assault on her,
His shadows shot across the hall, straight toward Kellen.
"No!" Melinda screamed. Everything happened at once. Kellen raised his sword, trying to deflect the shadowy spears. But there were too many, coming too fast. He was going to be struck down. And Melinda knew with absolute certainty, that she couldn't survive losing him again. Without thought, without hesitation, Melinda threw herself between them. The shadows hit her with the force of a thunderclap. They pierced through her like daggers of ice and darkness, burrowing deep into her chest, her shoulders, her sides. Pain, searing, all-consuming pain exploded through her body. She fell to her knees, gasping, her vision already beginning to blur. "Melinda!" Kellen's cry was raw, broken, a sound of absolute devastation. But she wasn't done. Not yet. Even as the shadows tore through her, Melinda reached deeper into herself, past the pain, past the fear, past the instinct for survival. She reached into the very heart of the realm itself, drawing upon the ancient magic that flowed through the land, through stone and soil and starlight. She pulled it all into herself, let it burn through her veins like liquid fire. And then she released it all at once. The explosion of pure, uncontaminated shadow magic erupted from her body. It wasn't a weapon of destruction. It was a purification. It sought out every trace of Mandal's corruption, every shadow he'd twisted and poisoned, and it burned it away. The darkness that had consumed the castle for so long was obliterated in an instant of blinding white light. Mandal screamed, a sound of rage and agony combined as his own magic turned against him. The shadows that had sustained him, that had kept him alive beyond his years, unraveled. His body convulsed, and then he simply crumbled into dust, blowing away on the breeze. The throne room fell silent. Melinda collapsed, her body unable to sustain her. She fell backward, and Kellen caught her, cradling her against his chest, his hands shaking. "No, no, no," he whispered, pressing his forehead against hers. "Stay with me. Please, Melinda, stay with me." But her eyes were already closing. The magic had consumed her, burned through her like a candle burning at both ends. She fought, willing her body, her mind, her heart to stay with him. Yet the darkness began to overtake her, gentle and final. "I love you," she breathed. "I'm sorry. I couldn't." "Don't you dare apologize," Kellen said fiercely, his voice breaking. "Don't you dare leave me." "Not now. Not after I just found you again." Chapter 11. For 3 days, Kellen never left her side. He bathed her fevered skin with cool water infused with moonflower and starlight. He changed the bandages on her wounds that refused to fully heal, as if her body was still burning from the inside. He whispered to her in the old Fae language, the language of his ancestors, prayers and promises and pleas for her to return to him. The healers said she wouldn't survive. The damage was too extensive. The magic had consumed too much of her essence. But Kellen refused to accept that. Lady Mallour came once, on the second day, with offers of help and thinly veiled suggestions that perhaps it was time to let go, that Melinda had done her part,
that the realm needed him now more than ever. Kellen's response was a look so cold, so utterly devoid of the warmth she had once hoped to kindle in him, that she never returned. On the fourth night, when her fever had peaked and her breathing had become shallow and labored, he lay down beside her and pressed his chest against her back, wrapping his arms around her. "Listen to me," he breathed against her hair. "You don't get to leave me. You fought too hard, sacrificed too much. I won't let you go. Do you understand me? I won't let you go." He poured his own magic into her, carefully, gently, not trying to heal her, but simply anchoring her to life, to him, to the promise they'd made each other. He sang to her in the old language. He told her stories of their childhood, of the adventures they would have together, of the kingdom they would rebuild, of the life they would share. And slowly, impossibly, she began to stabilize. By the seventh day, she opened her eyes. Kellen was there, as he had been every moment, his hand never leaving hers. Her eyes fluttered open. He gasped and brought her hand to his lips. "Welcome back." Melinda tried to speak, but her throat was dry. He immediately brought water to her lips, helping her drink, his movements gentle and reverent. "How long?" she asked. "Long enough," he said. "Long enough that I thought I'd lost you. Long enough to know that I never wanted to face another day without you in it." She managed a weak smile. "The realm." "Free," he said. "Mandel is gone. His corruption is purged. The castle is being restored, and I'm back on the throne." He paused, stroking her cheek tenderly. "But none of it matters if you're not here to see it with me." Over the following weeks, Melinda's strength gradually returned. The wounds healed, leaving only faint silver scars, marks of her sacrifice, marks of her power. Kellen stayed with her through every moment of recovery, helping her walk again, bringing her to the windows to watch the realm transform around them. The black stone throne was removed, and the crystal throne of starlight was painstakingly restored. The tapestries were rehung. The castle slowly returned to its former beauty, and with it, the kingdom began to heal. The day came when Melinda was well enough to stand without assistance. Kellen took her hand and led her to the throne room, now gleaming and whole. "I have something for you," he said, and in his eyes was a tenderness so profound it nearly took her breath away. He knelt before her, not in submission, but in devotion. From his pocket, he drew a ring of star silver and moonstone, ancient and beautiful, but twin to the one he wore. "Melinda," he said, his voice steady and sure. "Will you rule beside me? Will you be my queen, my partner, my reason for breathing? Will you marry me and spend the rest of our lives making up for the years we lost?" Tears streamed down her face as she nodded. "Yes. Yes. 1,000 times yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger and rose, pulling her into his arms.
And when he kissed her, deeply, tenderly, full of all the love and longing and promise of their future,